Okay, so picture this. You just turned 30. Maybe you're staring down 30 right now. Or maybe you already blew past it a few years ago, and you're sitting there thinking, wait, am I behind? And here's the thing. Nobody actually tells you what you're supposed to have figured out by now. Your 20s come with an instruction manual that's basically go to school, get a job, don't die. Nobody hands you a checklist for your 30s. So you scroll through Instagram and you see somebody your age buying a house, somebody else posting their fire journey, some guy bragging about his net worth going vertical, and you quietly close the app and think, am I actually doing this wrong? Look, I'm going to be straight with you. Most people in their 30s are not doing great financially. Not because they're dumb, not because they didn't try, but because nobody ever explained the actual milestones that matter. Instead, we get vague nonsense like save more and invest early, which, cool, thanks, very helpful, very specific. So today, we're doing this properly. I'm going to walk you through the real money milestones that actually move the needle in your 30s, the order you should be hitting them in, and why almost everyone gets the order backwards and pays for it later. And before you get comfortable thinking this is just another you should have a 6-month emergency fund video, it's not. We're going deeper than that. We're talking about the psychological traps your 30s specifically set for you, the exact numbers that separate people who retire early from people who work until 72, and one milestone in particular that almost nobody talks about, that ends up being the difference between a stressful 40s and a genuinely relaxed one. So let's start with the uncomfortable stat, because you know I love opening with one of these. According to Federal Reserve data, the median retirement account balance for households aged 35 to 44 is around $60,000. The median, not the people who are struggling, not the bottom of the barrel, the actual middle of the pack. $60,000 sitting in an account that's supposed to fund 30 years of not working. Do the math on that for 2 seconds. If you retire at 65 and that money needs to last until you're 90, $60,000 gives you roughly $2,000 a year if you want it to last. $2,000. That's not a retirement. That's a rounding error. And here's the part that actually makes me a little frustrated, because it's not that people aren't capable of doing better. It's that the entire system is built to make you feel like you're doing fine, right up until the moment you're not. You get a raise. Your lifestyle creeps up with it. You get a bonus. You take a trip. None of these decisions feel reckless in the moment. They feel earned. You worked hard. You deserve it, right? But stack 10 years of earned decisions on top of each other, and suddenly you're 39 years old, looking at a retirement account that wouldn't cover 8 months of your current expenses. So milestone number 1, and I want you to actually sit with this one, because it's not the one people expect. It's not have a certain net worth. It's building what I call your unshakable floor, which is really just a fully funded emergency fund, but treated like it's sacred, not like it's optional. 3 to 6 months of expenses, sitting in a high-yield savings account, completely untouched. Here's why this comes first, and why skipping it wrecks everything else. Every single financial disaster in your 30s, a layoff, a medical bill, your car transmission deciding to die on a random Tuesday. All of these things force people into debt specifically because they don't have this floor. And once you're in debt, every other milestone gets pushed back by years. Not months, years, because you're now paying interest instead of earning it. Think of your finances like a building. You cannot build the 10th floor if the foundation is made of sand. Every fancy investment strategy, every real estate deal, every get-rich scheme you see online, none of it matters if one emergency knocks the whole structure down. I've talked to so many people who jumped straight into investing, felt proud of themselves for being ahead, and then a surprise expense forced them to sell those investments at a loss just to cover rent. That's not bad luck. That's a foundation problem. And look, I get why this milestone gets skipped. It's boring. Watching a savings account sit there earning modest interest is nowhere near as exciting as watching a stock chart move. And there's a very real psychological pull to jump straight to the fun part of building wealth. But a Bankrate survey on emergency savings has repeatedly found that a significant chunk of adults would need to borrow money or sell something just to cover a $400 surprise expense. $400. Not a job loss, not a medical crisis, just a car repair or a broken appliance. If a number that small can derail someone, it tells you the floor was never actually built in the first place, no matter how good their investment portfolio might have looked on paper. Milestone number 2, and this is where people's eyes usually glaze over because they've heard it 1,000 times. But stick with me because I'm going to show you the actual math that makes this terrifying. Maxing out your employer match on your retirement account. If your company offers to match your contributions and you're not taking the full match, you are quite literally leaving free money on the table. Not kind of a good deal free money. Actual, literal, guaranteed, immediate return, free money. Nowhere else in the entire financial universe do you get a guaranteed 100% return, which is what a full match essentially is. Here's the number that should make you a little uncomfortable. If you're 25 and you contribute enough to get a full employer match of, let's say, $3,000 a year, and you just stop right there and never increase it, by 65, that unclaimed match money alone, assuming a 7% average return, adds up to over $600,000. That's not from your contributions. That's from money your employer was literally trying to give you that you said no to. And the wild part is, this isn't some obscure trick people don't know about. It's printed right there in your benefits packet. People just don't act on it because 30 years feels imaginary when you're standing in the present. Now here's where I want to slow down, because milestone 3 is the one that gets skipped constantly, and it's the one that quietly ruins people's 40s. High interest debt elimination. And I don't mean your mortgage. I don't mean a reasonable car loan. I'm talking about credit card debt specifically. The average credit card interest rate right now sits north of 20%. 20%. Let that sink in for a second. You are essentially handing your bank a return that most professional investors would consider an incredible year, except you're handing it to them instead of earning it yourself. Here's a metaphor that I think actually makes this click for people. Imagine you're trying to fill up a bathtub, but there's a hole in the bottom that's draining faster than the faucet is filling it. That's what investing while carrying high-interest debt looks like. You can put money into your retirement account, feel productive, feel like you're doing the right thing, and meanwhile that credit card balance is draining your net worth faster than your investments are filling it back up. The math genuinely does not work in your favor until that hole gets patched first. So milestone 3 is simple to state and genuinely hard to do. Attack any debt with an interest rate above about 7 or 8% as aggressively as your budget allows before you ramp up other investing. Not instead of the employer match. That one still comes first because free money beats guaranteed savings. But after that, debt elimination jumps the line ahead of almost everything else. Okay, milestone 4. And this is where things start getting interesting, because this is the one that actually determines whether you retire comfortably or whether you're one of those 70-year-olds still working a register, because you have to, not because you want to. This is hitting what's sometimes called your crossover point trajectory, which sounds fancy, but it's really just this. By age 30, financial experts and multiple retirement studies generally point to having somewhere around 1 times your annual salary saved for retirement. By 35, closer to 2 times your salary. By 40, 3 times. I know, if you're sitting here doing the math in your head and feeling your stomach drop a little, take a breath, because here's the actual important part. These benchmarks are not a pass-fail test. They're a compass, not a finish line. What actually matters more than hitting an exact multiple is understanding the mechanism behind why this window, your 30s specifically, is mathematically the most powerful decade you will ever have for building wealth, and almost nobody explains why. So let's talk about compound growth for a second, because everybody's heard the phrase, but almost nobody's actually seen the graph. If you invest $10,000 at age 30 and never add another dollar to it, assuming a 7% average annual return, by the time you're 65, that $10,000 becomes roughly $106,000. Now, If you wait until 40 to invest that same $10,000, by 65, it only grows to about $54,000. Same amount of money, same rate of return, just a 10-year difference in when you started, and you end up with literally half the outcome. That 10-year gap in your 30s is worth more than doubling your money would be worth if you started later. This is why your 30s specifically matter so much. It's not that you're old. It's that you're standing in the exact window where time is doing more of the work than your actual contributions are. Here's the metaphor I always come back to for this. Compound growth is like rolling a snowball down a hill. In your 20s and early 30s, the snowball is small, and honestly, it feels kind of pointless. You're pushing this tiny thing, and it barely seems to be picking up anything. But the hill doesn't care how it feels. Every rotation the snowball makes, it picks up more snow than the rotation before it, because it's bigger now. By the time you're in your 50s and 60s, that snowball isn't being pushed by you anymore. It's rolling on its own momentum, picking up more in a single year than you contributed across an entire decade earlier on. The frustrating part, the part that actually gets me a little worked up, is that this means the people who need compound growth's help the most, people starting from nothing, are the ones who benefit most from starting now, in their 30s, even with small amounts, rather than waiting until they have more to invest. Because by the time they have more, they've lost the one resource that actually mattered, which was time. Now milestone 5, and this is genuinely the one that almost nobody talks about, and it's the one I promised you at the beginning of this video. It's not a savings number. It's not an investment account. It's building what I'd call income diversification before you actually need it. Here's why this matters so much specifically in your 30s. This is typically the decade where your career either plateaus or accelerates, where layoffs statistically hit hardest for the first time in your working life, and where family expenses, kids, aging parents, mortgages, start stacking on top of each other simultaneously. A Bureau of Labor Statistics analysis of job tenure shows the median worker holds a given job for around 4 years, and that number keeps shrinking generation over generation. Relying on a single paycheck in a decade defined by instability is honestly a little bit of a gamble, even if it doesn't feel like one, while the paycheck is still landing every 2 weeks. This doesn't mean you need to start some elaborate side hustle empire, and please, for the love of everything, don't fall for the quit your job and become a full-time day trader nonsense that's all over social media. What it means practically is developing one additional income stream, even a small one, whether that's freelancing a skill you already have, a small investment property, dividend-paying investments, or even just negotiating your salary more aggressively than you currently are. The goal isn't necessarily to get rich off the side income. The goal is that if your primary income disappears tomorrow, you're not standing at absolute zero. Think about it like a table. A table with one leg falls over the second anything bumps into it. A table with 3 or 4 legs can lose one and still hold weight while you fix it. Your primary job is one leg. It might be a sturdy leg. It might even be the leg you're proudest of, but it's still just one leg. And your 30s are exactly the decade where you have enough stability and skill built up to start adding a second one without it feeling reckless. Now, let's talk about the milestone that trips up more people than any other one on this list. And it's less about a number and more about a mindset shift. And that's separating your net worth from your lifestyle in your own head. This is where the lifestyle creep conversation comes back around, because here's what actually happens to most people in their 30s. Your income goes up. Maybe you get promoted. Maybe you switch jobs for a raise. And almost immediately, your spending rises to match it. New car, nicer apartment, more frequent trips. And on paper, none of these individual decisions look irresponsible. That's what makes lifestyle creep so dangerous. It never feels like one big reckless choice. It feels like 100 small, reasonable ones. Here's a stat that I think genuinely surprises people. Studies on saving behavior consistently find that as household income rises, the percentage of that income actually saved tends to barely move. And for a lot of people, it goes down, not up. Because spending expands to fill the gap almost automatically. Meaning somebody making $150,000 a year isn't necessarily saving more, proportionally, than somebody making $70,000. They're just spending more, and calling it living a little, which, fine, sure, you should enjoy your money. I'm not telling you to eat rice and beans for the next decade, but there's a difference between intentionally choosing to spend more and unconsciously drifting into spending more just because the number in your bank account got bigger. The fix here isn't complicated. It's just uncomfortable. And it's this. Every time your income increases, decide in advance what percentage of that raise goes towards savings and investing before your lifestyle gets a chance to claim it. Even something as simple as committing 50% of every future raise to your investment accounts means your lifestyle still improves. You're not depriving yourself, but your wealth improves right alongside it, instead of getting left behind. And that actually brings me to the milestone that ties this whole video together. And it's less of a number and more of a moment. And it's this. At some point in your 30s, ideally earlier rather than later, you need to sit down and calculate your actual number. Not a vague, I'd like to retire comfortably number. An actual, specific dollar figure based on your expenses, multiplied out using something like the 4% rule, which just means if you want to safely withdraw money without running out, you generally need about 25 times your annual expenses saved and invested. If you spend $50,000 a year, that's $1.25 million. If you spend $80,000 a year, that's $2 million. I know these numbers sound enormous, and honestly, when you first calculate yours, it might feel a little bit like a gut punch. But here's the thing that changes everything once you actually have that number in front of you. It stops being abstract. It stops being this vague cloud of anxiety hanging over every financial decision you make, and it becomes an actual target you can build a plan around. Suddenly, save more isn't some fuzzy suggestion. It's, I need to be contributing this specific amount monthly to hit this specific number by this specific age. That clarity alone is worth more than almost any single investment strategy, because most people don't fail at building wealth because they made bad investments. They fail because they never had a real target to aim at in the first place. So let's bring this all together, because I've thrown a lot at you, and I want you to walk away from this with an actual order of operations, not just a pile of facts. Build your emergency fund first, because it's the foundation everything else stands on. Grab your full employer match, because that's free money sitting on the table with your name on it. Kill high-interest debt aggressively, because it's actively working against every other move you make. Push hard on investing during your 30s specifically, because this is the decade where time does more heavy lifting than money does. Build a second income stream before you desperately need one, not after. Control lifestyle. Creep on purpose instead of letting it happen by accident. And finally, calculate your actual number so you stop guessing and start aiming at something real. Here's the last thing I want to leave you with. Nobody hits every single one of these milestones perfectly. And if you're sitting here realizing you're behind on 2 or 3 of them, that's not a failure. That's just information. The people who end up financially secure in their 50s and 60s aren't the ones who did everything right in their 30s. They're the ones who looked at exactly where they stood, adjusted, and kept moving instead of freezing up out of shame or comparison. You don't need to fix everything today. You just need to fix the next thing. Pick the milestone you're furthest behind on out of everything we just covered and go take one real step toward it this week. That's genuinely how every single person who's financially comfortable right now actually got there. One uncomfortable but deliberate decision at a time. Please like and subscribe for more weekly videos.